Hello and welcome everyone to today's episode of the podcast. Today I am joined by the wonderful Lisa Ramos, and Lisa has her own amazing business called Mona Lisa, and she sells wonderful handmade jewelry and also handmade handbags, which I definitely recommend checking out. We'll put a link to her Instagram and her website in the show notes. And she is based in Northern California, where she handmakes all of her jewelry and her bags. And what's really interesting about Lisa's business, we're going to find out more about it, is she sells her work primarily through events and shows, and something that here in the UK we might call craft fairs or trade shows. And in America, they're called road shows and various other names. So we're going to be learning a bit about how her business works and how you can use events to be able to interact with customers, sell your work. And, not everything has to be online because it's not the way that suits everybody. Some of us like to meet people in person and be more interactive. So welcome, Lisa. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Hi, Jessica. Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and share my experiences.
Yes, absolutely. So before we get into talking about your business and the events that you do you want to share a bit about how you got into jewelry making and making the bags as well, and what kind of led you to that journey? Is it something you've always done, or is it something fairly new for you?
Okay. Well, I've always loved handbags and jewelry. And I started studying design to development in 2013. And I just really fell in love with the design to development process. So basically, what that means is I started experimenting, working with different leathers and metals. And then I also, started learning different techniques. And I also was extremely fascinated with different types of machines. So just the whole combination of that, I was so fascinated and intrigued because there are just so many design possibilities. It's unlimited, and I just find that incredible. So that really was the start of my journey. And so from 2013 until 2017, I was really just working with my hands. And then at the end of 2017, in November, I launched my business with a small collection of handbags and leather jewelry. And so that was really the beginning.
Wow, wonderful. And did you go to like courses, or did you learn online, or how did you kind of learn these techniques once you'd realized it was something that you wanted to do?
Well, let's just say I am very shy when it comes to classroom settings. I do not like them. So I am self-taught. I read a lot of books. I've watched thousands of hours of different videos. I've also been members of different training courses where I could just really train at my own pace and just, at my own comfort level. And then, of course, most importantly, because you can have all the information in the world, but you have to work with your hands, and you have to get in there in the guts of just making things and making mistakes and learning how to solder, having disasters happen and, melting your piece by mistake. So I just really spent just thousands of hours just creating with my hands and learning and discovering what really feels right and looks right for my particular collection.
Yeah, amazing. I think that's quite inspiring as well for anyone listening who isn't so confident going into classrooms, or even just whose lifestyle means they don't have the time to travel and make it to places. That there's so much you can learn online and through books, and like you said, just practicing and being practical. And you've then been able to create this amazing business out of it. Did you always know you wanted to create a business, or to begin with, was it more of like an outlet and a hobby?
Well, I've always wanted to have my own business, and I always wanted to be in fashion. I just never thought that I could do it. I just thought, well, I've been working for companies for so many years. How am I going to start my own thing? There's just so many, it's so competitive. And, also I think too, as we get older, because I'm no spring chicken, I am in my 50s, so I'm a little older. I've a little wiser than I was in my 20s. I just, over the years, as you get older, you get a little more confident. And for me, I was became more of a risk taker to try new things and to, be okay with maybe making mistakes and, just getting back up and trying it again. So I think that definitely was part of it.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And just for the record, you are a spring chicken. Um, and you look amazing. So,
Thank you.
you're doing all the right things. Brilliant. Okay, so you learned how to make was it jewelry and handbags at the same time, or did you start with the bags and move into jewelry?
So I started with handbags and I really wanted to also create some jewelry pieces. So I started creating leather jewelry. And through that process, I discovered, there wasn't for me the areas that I was marketing to. It it wasn't really working. It wasn't really gelling. I was selling some leather pieces, but it wasn't working. So I had to really go back to the drawing board, go back to the bench and try new things and experiment. And I'm so happy that I did, because once I did that and I tested the market, I really started to understand, what different customers want, and not to be scared to try new things. And so that's how my collection really has evolved over the years.
Wonderful. And I think for anyone watching on YouTube, there's this beautiful studio behind you. Is that something that's built up over the years? Is that in your home, or do you go somewhere to work? How's your kind of business structured now?
Sure. Well, let me just tell you, my first studio, as you saw it, and I write about it in my blog, so you can see the pictures. My first studio was just a one decent sized room, but it just had everything was so cluttered. I don't know how I focused. And so I took this other room upstairs in my home, and it's quite spacious. It's very open. And just over the years, as I've built my business, I've continued to refine it, add a lot of different tools and, different organizational pieces, more attractive cabinets, better storage components, things like that. So it has been a process. It did not, happen for
Start like that.
studio.
Yeah. Well, I love that. And I think, I think every sort of 3 or 4 years, I try and refresh the studio a little bit. I'm not in it right now, but the one that I have in my house. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because when you look at someone's journey who's been doing it a long time, you can look at their studio and think, wow, they've got all this stuff. And like you said, we all start normally just with like a few tools and just giving it a go on the kitchen table, and then like, oh, should I get a bench, and gradually adding. So, but it's always lovely to see, I can see like a little sewing machine in the background, the jeweler's bench, all the bits and pieces. So
Oh, so can you? I wasn't sure if you could. I don't know if you could see my jeweler's bench, because
is there not one just behind you, or is
I
that for like a
know if I move this a little bit, if you can set up, that's my assembly area. Whoops, you can kind of see a little bit.
Oh, wonderful. We get
a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I have a soldering station too that's out in the garage. So that's something that I also have like a whole nother area for soldering and doing more like in-depth cleaning that's really dirty, as you know.
Wow. Wonderful. Great. Alrighty. So let's talk a bit about your events. So tell us about how you started selling your work and what led you down the path of selling in person at these kind of roadshows or events that you do.
Sure. So just a little background. I have a 20-year plus tech background, and I knew going into having my own business that if I was going to look at selling online, it was going to be very competitive. At least this was my perspective. And it was probably going to be it was going to be expensive in terms of creating an ad budget and so forth. And so what I wanted to really do, based off of being having experience in tech and also sales, I really wanted to be able to have relationships with my customers and be able to build those relationships. And so I felt, it's really important for me to find shows where I can market my work, I can connect with my customers, and continue that connection and build that clientele. And so that was my perspective on starting shows. So what I did, and I knew nothing about pop-ups and festivals, I just started researching shows. I made a list, I went and visited a few, and then I said, okay, I'm going to sign up and start doing shows. So I started doing shows, and it was quite a learning process. You learn right away that, you definitely have to have patience. It's going to take some time. And that was really the start of it. I started with a couple of shows, and I felt like, gosh, these shows really aren't working. Let me try some others. And so I just kept testing the market, testing different areas. And then also during that process, working on my collection, refining, adding, and then slowly, as you plant these little seeds, things start to develop over time. And so that's really how I started the journey.
I love that. I have so many questions. I guess one of the things that stands out to me about you is that you don't seem to have got too disheartened if you did a show and it didn't work out. And especially at the early stages, I imagine that a lot of us, and I know for me, sometimes you do a show and it doesn't work and it's like raining and no one comes and someone says your stuff is too expensive, and it's just, it can really affect how our confidence, I think, and wanting to do other shows. How would you say you've managed like disappointment? Because you must have had some challenging shows. Is it to do with your mindset, or is it just something that you knew was going to work and you just had to keep going?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I definitely have an advantage because I've been in sales before, where my previous sales experience was actually selling online websites where I didn't meet with people. So it was extremely challenging to sell. And let me tell you, I would do, a proposal, I would spend 8 hours on it and not get the deal, go on to the next one. So I was just used to rejection. And I realized, you keep at it and things start to happen. You just don't want to give up. And you have to be open to trying new things. And I think the most important one piece of advice that I think is so critical is that your neighbor may say, this is the best show. It may be really great for them, but not for you, because you have to understand who your market is. Who's buying your pieces? What type of spending power do they have? What kind of style jewelry are they looking for? It's important for you to know all these different things. And you discover that by doing all these different types of shows. And it's a bit like a marathon where, you're training, you're out there, and you spend all day and you make 2 sales or you make no sales, and then you go on to the next one, and then it starts to get a little better, and you just keep at it. That's what I say. Just keep going, keep trying, and it will eventually pay off.
I love that. That's great advice. I think especially, the thing of you were used to being rejected. And I was just thinking how valuable that is just in general, to be kind of a little bit resilient, actually, like, it's okay if this doesn't work out. And it sounds like you were focused more on the long-term strategy that you had in mind, rather than just this event needs to make it, which I think is probably really important with this kind of business model as well, as kind of. So did you make a decision you were going to sell mostly through shows, and then did you go ahead and just book a whole load, and maybe I'm asking lots of questions at the same time, but roughly how many do you do a year? Give us an idea of like how many of these events.
Well, I can say I remember in 2019, I did 46 shows, and those are 2-day shows. Some of them are 3. And so I was working really almost every weekend. nine months out of the year. And I know that's a lot. It's intense, but I was looking big picture. I want to fast track this. I want to be able to go and do the shows. I want to understand the market. I want to collect the data. I want to continue refining my collection. I want to start building my clientele. And then as things start to progress, then I'll be able to pull back a little bit. But I know in the beginning, I got to do the training. I gotta do all the hard work and lay the foundation. And then eventually I'll be able to step back a little bit more. So that was my perspective on it.
Yeah.
And last year I did 33 shows. So it was a little less. And last year, I was my biggest year. And I did less shows, but that, again, it was over the years, I did all the work and then it was starting to pay off.
Absolutely. Yeah. And how do you pace yourself? Because you're making everything by hand and doing the shows. Do you like have days off during the week if you're going to be working all weekend, or how do you kind of manage your energy around that?
Sure. I am high energy, so I do have that advantage.
I just don't sleep ever.
Yeah. I mean, usually during the show time, the show weeks, I'm usually working 6 days a week. I usually take one day off. And then there will be, out of those 9 months, there may be, 1 month I only have 3 shows instead of 4. That can happen too. So it just depends. But during the craziest month for me is November. It is so fast paced. It's working 7 days a week almost, just it's pretty intense, but it's the biggest month. So I know that going into that, and I just, get excited about that and gear up. And then also if I know that that's my busiest month, then, a couple of months prior to that, I really want to be ahead of the game of having my collection ready. I don't want to have to be scattering during this busy time trying to keep up.
Yeah.
So it's just being prepared.
Absolutely. And how do you pick which shows you do? Is that something that's refined over time? So just imagine you're researching different shows, and are there different segments of the market? Are there some that are closer to you and further away, like logistically? How does all of that side of it work for you?
Sure. Yeah. I like to stay within my Northern California area. I have done farther shows, but I really try to keep it within that area. So that could be, up to 2 hours away from where I live. And so that's pretty much the distance aspect of it. In the beginning, I tried pretty much every show from a small pop-up to a maker's market show to a large festival to fine art shows, indoor shows. I tried them all because that way I could really collect all the data and determine, what's going to really make sense the following year. And I also, from day one, I've kept all my different numbers on my shows, how much the show costs, how much not only the going into the show, but also, driving to the show, toll fees. And then some shows you have to pay commission. So I keep track of that. So then that way I can go back each month and each year and really analyze, whether or not I want to do a show. But I also too want to express that, shows fluctuate. So I've had shows where I keep giving it a try. And then after the 4th time, it ends up being incredible because I've built a client base in that area. So again, it's that patience and just putting in the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember somebody once saying to me, do a show 3 years in a row before you decide if it's right for you or not, because the first year people are just like, who's this new person? They're not quite sure. They're just like checking you out. And then the second year they're like, oh, I recognize them, but I'll have a look. I'm not quite ready to buy. And then the third year they're like, okay, let's do this. I mean, obviously that's a generalization, but that helped open my mind to the idea that just because people don't buy it the first time in a show, it doesn't necessarily mean it's not going to be good in the future, especially if you feel like you said, it's your ideal customers. If you feel like they're totally not your customers, then perhaps it's a sign that, okay, it's not the right space for you. But it sounds like you did loads of research and really found your people. And I'm guessing now people come knowing that you're going to be there and are excited to see you.
Yes, yes. And going back to what we were just talking about, the one thing that I think is so funny, I used to see these two friends, they would walk by my booth, probably, I would say, all these different art and wine festivals I would do. They would walk in, they'd look, never buy anything. After probably the eighth time, they both bought something. So, again, that goes to show you that for them, they had to see me 8 times before they actually purchased something, and then they purchased something. So, you never know.
Yeah, absolutely. And how many of your clients or customers would you say are repeat customers? Is it for you, you do so many events, is it always new people coming in, or are there people sort of returning and coming back? And I guess kind of a tag along to that question as well, while it's in my mind, is how many people buy in the show, and do you get many after show sales of people who are kind of were thinking about it and then perhaps go on your website? How does that kind of play out for you?
Sure, sure. So the one thing that this is going to all tie in together, from day one, I've been capturing emails. So I get my customer emails and then interested customers. So I have two different email databases. And so every month I send out just one email to my customers and to potential customers. I feature some of my new products, and then I give them a listing of my shows and where I'm going to be. And that has been gold, because some of them either go to the show specifically to get something from me, or they will buy something online. But I know you've talked about this, Jessica. Those emails are so critical, and it's free. I mean, it's a lot of time, it's free collecting those emails. The emails are just, you've got to do it. And so that has really helped me continue having my client base, and also creating new clients with those potential clients. They may start off as being a potential client. Over time, as they receive my newsletters or they attend a show, they then will become customers. So it's a combination.
Yeah. So you have people coming to see you, people buying before they come on the website, people buying when they're there, and people buying afterwards. And I guess that's like, kind of the dream of what you want, is just lots of different opportunities for people to buy, because certain purchases, they might want to see it in person, so they have the option. But sometimes, we just want to like click add to basket at 12 o'clock at night when we've got nothing else to do, we can't sleep.
Right.
We don't want to have to wait for someone to respond. We just go for it. So,
Right.
How would you say, because would you say your business is you primarily sell through shows?
It is over 90. If I did not do shows, my sales would be down probably 92 or 90% down. So it's primarily shows. I would say, and it's changing. So last year, I would probably say 94% of my sales were from shows.
Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's very inspiring for anyone who feels, because we definitely have people in our community who say, I see all the Instagram and the social media and it's not for me. I want to sell face to face. I want to speak to somebody, and I want them to see my work. And of course, it's good to also be doing social media. And we can talk about, how you fit that in as well, because it sounds like a superwoman going on as well a little bit, that you're able to do it all. But I think, it's just very inspiring to know that you can run a business based on event sales, that is a very strong model. Because I think when people see you as well, we always say jewelry is a very trust-based purchase, that we have to trust, is it real silver, is it real gold? Of course, there's hallmarking and things, but a lot of consumers don't really understand about all of that. And actually, if they see a person like those ladies who saw you 8 times, they're like, we know Lisa, we go way back. then they feel really good and confident about that purchase. And I think there's something about in-person interaction which stays with people as well, like for the
Yes.
sales.
Yes. And it does take time to get used to. It is very hard. I mean, I will not lie. I'm up at 4 a.m. and I'm out the door sometimes, by 5. And I get home some nights at 7, some nights at 8:30. And then I have to take all my product with me after, Saturday night, pack it up, take it off my van when I get home because I don't trust anybody, they might steal it in my car. And then the next morning I've got to get up a little later and then I've got to go set it up. Not my tent, but just put my products back in, and then I have to unload. But if you create systems in place, it is really doable. It's really, how you approach it.
And do you have any help in your business? Do you have any assistance, or is it something that you might consider in the future?
Well, I am a little bit of a control freak. My husband's on outdoor shows. He'll help me in the morning setup, which is fabulous because parking your van can be a little tricky, and I don't ever like to leave my product alone. My product's always with me, even if I have to, cart my dolly with me. It's always with me. And then I do takedown by myself. I do have a friend that will come to certain shows and she'll just, allow me to have a bathroom break. But normally I am really out there on my own. And the great thing about doing outdoor shows is once you've done a lot of outdoor shows, when it comes time to doing the indoor shows in the winter, it's luxury. It's so much easier. And so it makes it fun having a little bit of a combination of both.
Absolutely. And what would be some of your tips for doing shows on the day? Like, what kind of things have you learned, having done so many? What would you say are like the main things that may help people to prepare for their own show?
Sure. I even have a little list because I don't want to.
Great.
Okay, the first thing is I remember my husband telling me this. It's all about the equipment, and it really is. So when you're loading in and loading out, if you don't have the proper equipment, you can risk damaging your product, hurting your back, hips, or just, having a disaster. So what must-haves would be an industrial dolly, which basically means a dolly that really can withstand a lot of different bins that you can stack on it. And then I have a great one that actually collapses so that I can expand it, collapse it, and stick it under my table. So my products are always with me, which is fabulous. I don't have to go run to my van to go get my dolly. Also, stackable bins are so important. I've been to shows, and this happened to me in the beginning, where you have these bins, the lids don't fit properly, things are flying out of it, you're getting agitated, you're sweating. It's actually kind of comical if you think about it. So if you just invest in some really good stackable bins, then that's really going to help you get in and get out and not damage your product, and also be able to load it in your vehicle. Folding tables are important. I've seen people have these long tables. They're dragging them to their car. They can barely lift them. If you get foldable tables, that just fold, then you can easily lift them on your dolly, put them in your vehicle, and it just makes it so much easier and saves a lot of time. And then I also say, don't forget the chair. I've seen people forget chairs and then they're standing all day and it's just a nightmare. Also too, you stand a lot, which can be really hard on your feet and back. So I have these really soft pads that I stand on that you can't see. They're actually like behind, in the back of the tables, and that will really help save the day and just also make your experience much more positive when you're doing shows.
Absolutely.
And then
comfort is important.
Oh yeah, you want to be comfortable. Also, having durable displays, and that durable meaning when you do outdoor shows, you would not believe the wind factor. I have seen tents blow away, and I'll get into the whole tent, what kind of tent you have. So you want to have you want to make sure your displays are not going to blow away just with like a small little wind gust that comes through. So it's really, really important.
What kind of things do you have that don't blow away? Is it
okay? Good question.
It's like concrete jewelry busts.
Well, I do. I have this really pretty. It's like I would say plexiglass. It's not. It's a case for rings, and it's relatively heavy. It's not. There's no way it's going to blow away by the time you put all the metal rings in there. It's very heavy. It's got a lid so you can lock it if you have to run to the restroom. So it's protected. Also, a lot of earring stands that they make, they're pretty heavy. They will blow over during major wind currents, but for the smaller wind that comes through, they're usually okay. And then if it starts to get too windy, you may have to put some of your pieces away. I always keep my side panels up except for the opening, because I don't want my handbags to blow away. So it makes my tent a little warmer, but it also protects all of my pieces. So
good things that you don't think about until
no.
show, and it's so horrible.
Yeah.
And I guess things like layers as well, wearing lots of different layers if it's hot or cold, or making yourself super comfortable.
Yes, and lots of layers. And bring a fan. I have this beautiful DeWalt fan. I've been at shows where it's 95 degrees in my booth, and those days are rough, but I have a huge DeWalt portable fan, and I bring 2 big portable batteries. And then I always bring iced water. I freeze ice, like bottles of water. And that really helps. And then when you're buying a tent, make sure, and I repeat, make sure you get really strong weights. I went the cheap route, and I had to learn the hard way. I had to hold my tent down all day. So the tent that I have, it's durable. It's got all the panels. You need 4 panels, because at night you have to put a panel in front to lock it up, or to close it. And then the total weight amount I have is 124 pounds total. So I have 4 weights on the sides. And that
that sounds very important for outdoor shows. Yeah.
Critical. There are tents that will blow like up in the air, and then if they go and hit someone that's making glass, they're going to be responsible for paying for that collection that they damaged. Wow. So yes.
Very, very important. And then, so talking to people, which sounds really simple, and you've got a sales background, so I imagine a lot of this is quite natural for you, but how do you start conversations? As different people have different ways of doing it. Do you let people browse and then offer something? Do you kind of, if someone comes up to your stand, do you talk to them right away? Tell us a bit about how you engage with people at shows.
Sure. I think the first thing that I say is that, everything in the collection is handmade by me. And it's made in Northern California. And then I kind of can sense whether or not they are bothered by if they want to be left alone, or if they're welcoming. I mean, I can, through all the different experiences, I can really tell. And if they seem like they're really warm and they're engaging, then I'll start to dive into different things. If they're looking at a ring, I'll explain the process of the ring, that these are all the different techniques that I have to do to create this, so that, as they're looking at it and they're asking that price point, they'll understand, oh, okay, so this ring is $285. Okay, so she's explaining all these steps. Okay, that makes sense. So I think it's important for them to understand, the techniques that you use to create, and also too what makes your collection different than somebody else's. I think that's important. But also respecting, whether or not they want to just have more of a quiet shopping experience.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting to see how people interact when they're buying from you. Do you find you have some customers who will talk to you for a long time, and other customers that will just almost say nothing and just be like, those, please? How does it, yeah, what are your customers like?
Yes, it's definitely a balancing act. I'll give you an example. I had a situation where somebody had come to look at these earrings, and they couldn't really make a decision, but I could see that a lady was really interested in one of my expensive handbags. And so I pulled away because I knew that the woman who was interested in the handbag was going to walk away any second. And so I showed her the bag, she liked it, and immediately she got it. And that was, sales don't always happen that quickly. Now the other lady, she ended up leaving, but I had to kind of make a decision, who seemed like they could be on their own making decisions versus someone who needed a little more, they were going to need assistance. Because if you're looking at and want to look at my handbags, I need to hand it to you. So it's a little bit of a juggling act, and it can be really hard when you've got 4 people at your booth. I just try to acknowledge everybody and say, I'll be with you as soon as I can. Or like in some cases, there'll be a couple of people waiting, and I can see that someone wants to look at rings. And so I have to unlock the box, but I also have to watch that something doesn't get stolen. So it's a juggling act. And with my rings, I keep, like, my gemstone rings, I only show them to customers individually. With my other rings, sculpted metal pieces, I'll open up the locked box and let them look at it and just try to carefully watch. So it's a little bit of a juggling act, but you get better and better over time.
Yeah, absolutely. I imagine it is. And it must be really lovely to have people look at your work and, that interaction with the customers. But I guess a fear that many makers have is, what if somebody says, something that's not kind?
I've had it happen all the time. I had someone go, her friend goes, "Oh, what do you think of that bag?" And she goes, "Oh, that bag is ugly." And I said, "Oh, I made that bag." And she goes, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." I said, "No, listen, you're entitled to your own opinion. I mean, everybody has their own unique style." And I just kind of turned it into a positive. I've also had comments like, where I've said, "Oh, I hand make everything. I'm an artist." I had one woman say, "Everybody's an artist." I just started laughing. So I just, in some cases, I just don't say anything. And then usually they'll just walk away. So I take the good with the bad. And, again, that tough skin, you're never going to be able to please everybody. And just always remember, there are people that will love your work and they'll appreciate what you do. And when you have those moments where someone says something super negative, just try not to let it get under your skin too much, but it can be challenging.
Yeah, especially if you're tired and it's been a few days. But yeah, I think it probably helps as well. Like, I know for some shows when I used to do them, we kind of had this like feeling between all of the makers there, that we were all in it together kind of thing. Like, you kind of make friends with someone next to you, and if someone's a little bit funny, it's like, everyone kind of is in it together. And I think sometimes
Yes.
if you can make buddies next to you, that can help you.
It's fantastic.
Yeah,
The art community is great. And I've met such incredible people, and I've made great friends, and you definitely can learn from each other. And you can also, help each other out if something happens and you've exchanged numbers, and you need someone at a show. It's a great community. You can really meet a lot of wonderful, talented people.
Love that. What would you say is the best show you have done to date, and why? Put you on the spot.
I won't name what it is.
Okay, but, tell us a bit about it. Why you like it.
For me, it would be the fine art shows, because the fine art shows are going to be, they're curated shows where they're juried shows where they're picking artists that are hand making their pieces and not mass producing it. So those shows have been the best for me. And you also get people with the spending power. The spending power, and also the appreciation of artists and their work, and they see the value in, buying a one of a kind ring and in being okay with that higher price point. So for me, it's definitely the fine art shows. But to remember, they do cost money. You could, for some fine art shows, they could be, 450 and up. Some of them go into the thousands, and then there's usually a 10% commission on top of that.
Yeah.
So you get the crowds, but you definitely have to pay for that. And then you also have to go through the jury process, which is a whole nother topic that can be very challenging on the ego, because you may get rejected several times before you get into a show.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to briefly touch on that, I think sometimes jewelers struggle to get into shows, particularly with jewelry, because it's, there's so many of us, which is awesome. And, we need to have something that stands out a little bit. Is that something you struggled with early on in your show career?
Yes.
But I guess the way that you dealt with it was just by applying to so many that even if you didn't get into them all, you still managed to find a good kind of repertoire of shows.
Yes. And I think to just apply, and as you evolve, for me, I know I'm always learning new skills, and I'm reworking my collection and adding new designs. That will certainly help with the jury process. You've got to keep at it and don't let it discourage you. I remember I had applied for the American Craft Council, their San Francisco show, when they used to have it. And I wasn't going to do it because I said, they're not going to pick me. And I was able to get in for my handbags, and I was thrilled. I couldn't get in for jewelry, but I got in for my handbags, and it was a super positive experience. And that's also another thing. If you have two mediums, some shows will let you in with one medium, but not the other. So that's something that you'll have to decide, if that's going to work for you. And, for some it will, and for others it won't.
Yeah, I suppose it gives you options and possibilities.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what would be your, anyone listening who's thinking, wow, that sounds amazing. I want to try and, apply for shows and see if I can bring more of that into my business. What would be your kind of main tip for them?
I think the main tip is, I got a couple. So
Go for it.
I think the couple of main tips is really just look at it as a big picture. It is going to take time. It's probably not going to happen in 1 year. I've been doing this now. I've been in business 5 years, but I haven't been. During COVID, I couldn't really do that many shows. So I've only been doing shows actively really for 3 years. And, I've done a lot, but just, create a list, do a little research, visit some shows, but also don't overthink it. Just go for it. Don't make excuses. Just go for it. You have to really, understand who your market is, and the area you're going into will also dictate your market. And once you understand your market, then as you keep doing all these different shows, you'll be able to kind of navigate through what's working and what's not. But it takes time. And, also too, remember, everybody sells at a different pace. There are shows that I've gone to where everybody's complaining how horrible the show is. And I'm like, gosh, this has been a great show for me. And then I had it the other way around, where everybody's like, oh, it's so great. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, it's not that great. So it just depends. And with sales, it's whether or not your market's there, and it's whether or not they go into your booth. That's it. Don't get too down on yourself, because you could have had 5 people in your market, and then they got interested in going and getting a glass of wine, and they walked by and didn't see you. So you got to just keep at it, and the rewards will come.
Yes. That's great advice. Just persistence, resilience, and then it can be an amazing business model. And yeah, it's very inspiring to see your business and how it's evolved, Lisa. And what is next for you? What does your future look like, do you think? Is it more shows? Is it more kind of specific shows that are really good for you? What would you like in the coming years?
Well, I just got a new piece of equipment. I got a pulse arc welding system. So I'm excited. I'm going to be using that. So I'm hoping that with that, I'll be creating, some new designs, learning some new skills. I'm going to just continue doing the shows. I'm really going to try to, taper it down in the next couple of years, but really still keeping a pretty fast track on the shows and seeing, what works and what doesn't, and building that clientele, because that's really helping me grow my business, is building that clientele. And as I said earlier, if I didn't do any shows, I would have at least 95% less sales. And that's pretty crummy. So that tells me a lot. And I do social media. But I don't get that much traction from it. I just don't. I am going to experiment a little bit with some advertising this year, but I definitely am still going to focus mainly on the shows, because that face-to-face client relationship is so incredibly valuable. It really is.
Absolutely. Well done for all your success. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your knowledge and your wisdom and some of your time with us today. So if people are listening and they want to come and connect with you and say hi, where is the best place to come and find you online and check out your jewelry and your handbags, of course?
Okay, so my website can be a little tricky to spell out, which is the monalisadesigns.com, but you can also get to it quickly by typing in the www.productsmadeincalifornia.com. That's a quick way of getting to my collection. And then on social media, if you go to at Mona Lisa Designs, both on Facebook and Instagram, you can definitely take a look at a little behind the scenes. And then also on my website, I have, especially for new artists, I have a blog that I've been working on for probably almost a year, a little over a year, just journaling my experiences, both challenges and success stories. So just so that people can understand that, business does certainly it takes a lot of time and effort, and don't give up.
Love that. Great message to end on. And we'll make sure we put the link to those in the show notes so you can go and check it out. Go and say hi to Lisa if you listened to the episode. Let her know that you had a listen, and it's just a lovely place to connect with other makers and creative community as well. And once again, Lisa, thank you so much. Lovely to meet you and hear about your business, and we'll speak again soon.
Thank you so much for having me. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you.